Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Marchuk. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. Our guest on this episode is Alexander DeRitter, who's the CTO and founder of SmythOS. Alexander's work with AI has led to a patent related to AI content generation, in addition to some groundbreaking work with AI agents, which is what we're going to be talking about with him today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation as we see the connection between individual requests made by people to LLMs get transitioned into interconnected AI agents that are working together to solve problems. So welcome, Alexander.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy you are here. So you've had an interesting upbringing and transitions here. So you started off sort of as a programmer, then you get into marketing and now entrepreneurship. Can you give us like a 30-second overview of how you got from point A to point B?
Yeah, I mean, I never really, I don't really think it's different at all. I fell in love with technology, and I always loved people, and so the intersection of humanity and technology has always fascinated me. To me, there's not much difference between like a psychologist and a prompt engineer, and not so much difference between a neuroscientist and an AI engineer. Uh, so to me, marketing is also about how you apply technology to reach people, which is again the psychology. A conversion optimization specialist is just a psychologist, but he's using technology as a ways to do it. And we're at a time where you really start seeing that the importance of this technology as it starts interacting with people at a larger scale, right? Instead of just optimizing your website for engagement, now you start optimizing your brand agent for engagement with customers. And so we see that paradigm shift. But to me, it's all like a continuity. Um, Whether you work for someone or you work for yourself or you work for a large company, right? Uh, as long as you put front and center, like driving your field forward, being passionate about what you do, there's a consistency there. And even if I wouldn't be a business owner tomorrow and I worked for someone, I'd still do what I'm passionate about. Maybe a
That's
little less
fantastic.
responsibility, but I'd be doing the same thing.
That's fantastic. And we talked earlier before we started the show here about some responsibilities, and certainly they are different when you are owning and managing your own business, for sure. So as we get into this, we started talking about this agent concept. How would you define agentic AI?
Yeah. Okay. So to me, the change happened last year, to 2023, in around March, April, May period, where GPT-4 became available because it had the ability for function calling. Function calling, um, think of it differently as like ability to tell Gmail send an email, ability to tell your vacuum cleaner start cleaning, ability to connect to a database and run a data lookup, ability to connect to a puppeteer that accesses or controls a website and maybe click around on a website on behalf of you for user testing. In other words, if you were to like compare it to like humans, imagine GPT-3 was like a brain in a bottle that only could do like digital input and output, like just short answers, where GPT-4 all of a sudden had digital arms and legs. It could move around and do stuff because it had function calling. So ever since function calling became available, um, maybe that same day, called a meeting with my team and said, ladies and gentlemen, the world has changed and it's never going back. And we got to pivot our entire company around this idea that the way we do work and the way we automate and the way we get things done from now on and forever will be agentic. And so we started building SmythOS that very next day.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, talk about software development and that sort of thing. How do you envision this whole evolution of agentic workflows impacting, say, traditional software development life cycles?
Yeah. So there's a agentic workflows impact on development, and there's agentic workflows impact on the business. I think there are two different things, right? When you're looking at it from a development point of view, I think that sorry, when you look at it from a development point of view, um, I actually think that visual agentic workflows are going to be the norm. And you kind of already have seen that in like visual workflows like Comfy UI. Um, you know, doing something like Comfy AI without visual workflows, it's almost unthinkable today. Yeah. So you wouldn't attempt to code that. It just wouldn't make sense. I think the same is true for the development of agentic workflows. And the reason is that LLMs are non-deterministic, meaning they have a lot of flexibility in how they go about doing things, right? If you put 10 people in a room, and you ask for something, the chances are that 10 people are going to do things in 10 different ways. Some will arrive at a correct outcome, some will arrive at a wrong outcome, but there'll likely be like 3 or 4 people who arrive at the right outcome in a totally different way. And so this is the nature of intelligence, right? That kind of creativity is what we want these models to have. And so, yeah, they're non-deterministic. Debugging a non-deterministic system is really hard because you run to a traditional code program, you run it, you know that every time you run it, it'll behave the exact same way. You do that with AI, and every time it behaves slightly differently. Oh, it didn't quite format the JSON the way I wanted. Oh, it didn't quite do this classification the way I would have expected as a human, because it behaves more like humans. In that sense, it's harder to debug. And so humans have already like figured out how to solve that. Um, we talk about managers, and we talk about teams and teamwork and collaboration. And we built entire superstructures to help us be more collaborative. And so when it comes to building agentic systems like with workflows, I really believe the future of development lies in visual orchestration for debugging and controlling how the AI behaves and making sure it is actually aligned. The concepts that we've pioneered is constrained alignment, not letting a large AI model dictate how it wants to do everything and then being blind to how it goes about things. In some cases, that can work, but for high stakes enterprise workflows, you want more control, and you want to control for every step what the AI is able to access and how they use it, and then basically have air gapped components where they're blind to what other AI systems do, because otherwise you can have data leakage, which is a huge problem in data governance. So the future of agentic for developers is that for for everybody else, the adoption of AI workflows, it's a little bit different. Here, the name of the game is lowering the barrier of entry. Like make AI used to be complex, and then we had ChatGPT, and it lowered the barrier of entry where your mom could use it and be like, "Wow, this is useful," right? Really powerful technology becoming easy to use. That's the name of the game. Still today, it's too hard to use agentic workflows for a non-developer without you having a passion for it or like watching a lot of YouTube videos and tinkering. The average person thinks agentic workflows are too hard to work with. The way that we like to think about it is that in the future, right, we need to think of agents more like digital coworkers. And so again, at SmythOS, we are doing a lot of work in that. We've already done a lot of work to make it easier. I still think it takes about 2 weeks for someone to really nail it right now, like really understand how to take advantage of such systems. And that's too long. Unless you can go in there and have no experience and immediately start benefiting from it, we've not done our job well enough. So we have a lot more to do for that adoption to happen in the non-developer community.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So we've got agents that are capable of doing things, and you mentioned something that certainly is something that is on a lot of people's minds, like mine, which is if I have an AI agent that could do things differently each time. Generally speaking, most people's let's say in finance, in accounting, that would generally be frowned upon to have sort of creative accounting happening because there are rules that are associated with that. So when we look at the governance that has to be associated with building a workflow that is agentic in nature, do you foresee or do you see an interplay or interaction with multiple tools that can offer that same kind of output? For example, taking AI and its strengths and pairing it with other types of more deterministic kind of code, scripts, RPA, that sort of thing. That's more deterministic to allow those outcomes to be known and governed.
Yeah, I think there's some misconceptions here. So one approach to agents is kind of the custom ChatGPT, where you take a monolithic model, you throw your APIs at it, a prompt, and you let it figure out what it wants to do. And if you think of agents in those terms, then your question makes a lot of sense. In the sense that it does not make sense to many businesses. But this is not how we see AI agents to actually be working in such environments. The way that we see them being valuable and being used is by very carefully crafting their workflows into components and flows and say this first, then that, then verify with this system, then cross check with that system, then provide an output. And for you to be able to dictate that workflow, including the checks and balances you need, actually is possible today in SmythOS. This is how we have built this from the ground up. Um, and also, to your other question, integrating with RPA, right? So many RPA have an open API. You can actually plug and play RPA inside Smith agents today. You mentioned code. You actually have code components that can be part of a workflow, allowing you to combine deterministic and non-deterministic components in your workflow. So what you mentioned is actually already possible today. Um, but it is not the way most people think of agents, because we kind of started out with so easy to use, everybody can do it. And we didn't start from the other side, uh, refine enough control where an enterprise can afford to use something like that. And I
Right.
think the two are in tension with each other. You know, with great power comes great responsibility. It's a quote from Spider-Man. Um, Somebody corrected me. It's like it's actually Spider-Man's uncle or something. Or it's like, yeah, same difference. I say things my dad says all the time too. But the thing is that when you want to use this in an enterprise, you actually have to adhere to the security, the data governance. There's so many things to think about, and those things are inherently not so easy, right? So how do you combine the ease of use with the power that you need to actually meet the enterprise requirements? Is the tension between those two and the balance of how you execute that where the magic happens. So I think SmythOS actually delivers on the requirements, the technical requirements, and is easier than code, but it's still got a long way to go before it's easy enough where anybody in the department can just pick it up and just walk with it. It still
Right.
requires somebody very passionate with a little bit of time on their hand to grasp their concepts of this. But then again, we're pioneering, right? And so if I had asked someone on the street to use spreadsheets 30 years ago, it would have been very challenging. And now kids in school are learning how to use spreadsheets. So sometimes that is just the nature of the game when you innovate.
That is the case. I mean, I remember in the turn of the 1900s when the automobile had just started, They were a group of enthusiasts, and they didn't mind literally getting their hands dirty if they wanted to go take a drive.
Right.
Nowadays, we walk in and we make the push button happen to get our car started, and off we go. So certainly it's early days. But one thing you mentioned that kind of sparked some questions here is related to having a multi-agent collaboration.
Hmm.
How would you see this multi-agent collaboration where you have a manager and these other agents to do some checks and
Yeah.
balances? How would that look in a real world scenario?
Yeah. Also, this is so fascinating. So, I think like if on day one of GPT-4 function calling release day, if on day one we talked about how everything was going to be agentic, later that week we had an entire flowchart diagram that we put together where we were thinking about um, ant colonies and beehives and the Borg in Star Trek. And we were, but less about that. That's scary sci-fi. More about like the idea that an ant as an individual agent does not have such high IQ, but it knows precisely what its role is, and it can behave intelligently inside of its role, right? And all of the communication happens with the pheromones, and somehow the queen or right of the nest somehow translates and disseminates that information, and then it comes back to her, and so forth and so on. So somehow she's in control of a multi-agent situation and has that bidirectional communication. It has a lot of similarities to like how a human company is organized, with the president, kind of like the queen, and then the high level managers, and then the teams underneath it, and then how a manager has to cascade news of his or her department up and down the information chain. So when you think about our society and almost everything that's worth anything to you, I mean, look around in your room and, pick an object that comes to mind. Then think about how that object came to being, how it got to your door, how it got packaged, who made that packaging, and what about the object itself? What about the engineers? What about the marketing people, etc., etc., etc.? You start understanding that, we are acting as a collective. Humans are acting like a collective. What we have achieved, we could never achieve individually. Right? And so we started thinking about multi-agent systems very early on in such a way. And like, there's many ways that you can design it, and the ways that multi-agent systems are designed actually also mimic a lot of like different government styles throughout the world and throughout history. Right? You have the king, right? You have the democracy. You have different models of governance. You have also like a more like city state level where different entities like work, and then we also have that in like monetary policy, and then we have innovations like in crypto with decentralized currency that nevertheless can somehow translate to one another. So all these principles really apply to this multi-agent concept at a fundamental level. The level that we're seeing orchestration happen in the industry today, we talk about the orchestrator. And the orchestrator acts a lot like a manager of a team. It takes an assignment, it breaks it down in a task plan, and then chooses which sub agents on their team members, are most suited to do that. And then as it gets the responses back, it reasons about that. But you can easily see that start expanding in the future. What about when the orchestrator gets stuck and needs a human expert as an agent to unblock them? What about running three teams in parallel and then having a manager on top of the three orchestrators that evaluates which orchestrator had the best solution to this particular problem? And then you can start building your tree up from there, with different agents and different managers having a different specialization. Then you think about the web, and this is kind of where we landed in our framework of how we see the future. The web is full of websites, and many of these websites are SaaS companies, but they either provide like a service, or they provide information, or they provide something. So one way to think about the web of the future is that every website, every domain has the potential to be a multi-agent system. And then we can have our personal assistants or companies' AI or whatnot orchestrate the web. So to me, the web is AGI because it is
Interesting.
alive, and websites evolve, they get better, or they fall behind and they disappear, like a natural selection process. New websites come up with brand new capabilities we've never seen before. Existing websites evolve to meet the needs of the day, just like an organism would, and so forth. And then decaying sites like cells or organisms disappear over time. And so the ecosystem evolves and is alive. And so as the web transitions really to this kind of executable web, where every website is not just a HTML browser page you consume data, but is also like an API you can interact with. Then you have a website that can do your taxes, a website that can do images, a website that can give you information, a website that can book a flight, and so you see this entire internet to be the AGI, right? Full of eight. That's the multi-agent system. That all that's missing is for you to then orchestrate the entire web to get your work done. You think about this. Many people, all they need to get their work done is what? A browser.
Yeah.
Right. So
It
the web
also, I guess that
becomes.
that goes back to the question. So you're with the information that's out there and interactions that happen. It appears though there's still one thing that's missing. That's that purpose behind it. So there's a reason why would these agents do anything unless they've been given some kind of task, which kind of leads
Mhm.
back to the purpose that people would fit within these organizations to be able to engineer those workflows in a way that they'd say, this
Mhm.
is what I need you to complete, and
Yeah.
to train the management agents as to what
Yeah.
good looks like or what the outcomes are, so
Yeah.
they understand why they're doing it as part of their overall activities. So one of the questions that I have that's sort of related to that is, um, we mentioned governance before. We have this whole kind of concept of purpose as we're building these systems that are interacting with each other, um, adding agents on top of other agents. It seems as though all of those parts tend to or would consume a lot of either compute resources or a lot of energy to be able to affect the changes that could potentially be done in different ways. So, as you mentioned earlier, we have an ant that does something that is very narrow knowledge base versus sort of the manager or perhaps the larger manager, the director version of that
Yeah.
within an organization, which may need even more capabilities.
Yeah.
How do you foresee organizations right sizing their agents then as we look towards this future of maybe perhaps segmenting the work?
Yeah. Well, this is a problem we've solved already with SmythOS, right? So um, it's a really important one. Um, in your workflow, you have different steps, different components, right? And each of these components can use the right AI model right for just that task, what that component is responsible for. Nothing more, nothing less, right? So you can have one agentic workflow that uses four different LLMs, three different databases, four different SaaS softwares, and your unique workflow, right? And so as you're designing this, right, you want to pick the model that is uniquely suited for the task. You do not want to apply a model that is good at everything but costs 10 times more to run. It's a total waste of energy, resources, and quite frankly, irresponsible for the planet. So we have this ability today, and it is the way of the future. And I think that the CEO of Anthropic, I just recently really came to that realization too, I think. Um, um, for a long time, the large AI labs were thinking in a monolithic sense. I need to be the AI that is the brain inside of everything. More and more, they start realizing, hey, wait a minute. If I distill my model into a very small, capable model that can be fine tuned, that can do a lot of the tasks, individual steps that people need in these agentic workflows. And they realize this as they start scaling their access to their models to more and more people, and usage goes up. Say, wait a minute, these servers really are expensive, right? Maybe we need to have like majority of simple work done by an agent that is a distilled version of it. It can still be very capable. Look at GPT-4o Mini, right? Or like O1 Mini. So these are oftentimes good enough for many tasks you would give it. But in addition to that, it's not even just one lab that has to have the best big and small distilled model for everything. You start looking at agents and AI models as having personalities. Different humans in your life have different qualities and strengths, don't they? And you wouldn't pack your team with only visionaries. You need a few integrators too. Different people have different styles and capabilities. So the same is true for AI models. So, for example, if you have you're an AWS customer on Bedrock, you'll find capable models by Cohere, by 821C Labs, the Jamba models. You'll see the Anthropic models. You'll see the Llama models. You'll see different, Amazon's own models, Titans. You'll see different models. Get to know them. They all have their own personalities and strengths and weaknesses. And even a person that is not your most valuable player in your company might still be uniquely the best person in a very narrow scope. And this is how you should be thinking about multi-agent orchestration and the individual workflows of each agent as well, using the right tool for the job. Don't try to put a screw in with a hammer. It's not the best idea.
So one thing you just mentioned, which kind of got my brain thinking at a different angle. So as people all have different personalities, and you mentioned, hey, get to know these LLMs. It sounds like to me, building, we have a human resources department that goes out and interviews candidates for a role. And these are people that they provide interviews for the specific roles that they're looking to do. It sounds like we're going to have a very similar kind of organizational model, if you will, that will have digital worker interviews for very specific roles, which may be transient, but they may be
Yeah.
required to do specific tasks. For example, hey, tax preparation or management of new law or governance model that we have to put in play.
Yeah.
How do we manage that without breaking the bank? Well, right now we'd hire a consultant. Is that the same kind of
You
model that you'd see for a multi-agent where we have an organizational model similar to we have for humans?
you're describing a search and ranking algorithm for the executable web.
So,
And so if
what do
websites
you think?
become, yeah, if websites become executable, in other words, agentic, and they can do something, then think of Google search as the way that it interviews different websites and ranks them based on how good they are at different intents. And so that becomes the job of the search engine. And in fact, in 2015, right, I predicted this would happen already with Google starting to use neural networks for judging content. And by analyzing the content that Google values highly in search versus content and information it values lower, I was able to do a lot of innovative work and patent work in semantic embeddings and reverse engineer kind of the psychology of what a Google search engine would be looking for from a semantic point of view. Well, that works really well for a web that's mostly content driven, but it does not work well for a web that will be mostly agentic or execution driven. One has to think that the concept of a website will seem very archaic to our grandchildren, because it requires you to not only find a website, but then also find the information you want on that website and click around, wasting time, puzzling together snippets of text. Websites will be like transformers, right? They will, like, I'm talking to robots from
Okay.
the movies. They will
I was thinking
change.
AI transformers, but thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, they will change shape to be what they need to be. Do they need to be a car or a truck or a plane, right? A websites can be self-assembling. We have this concept of dynamic server-side rendering, but what about dynamic server-side generation, where from all the knowledge from the website and all the images and authors that it has, it can assemble the perfect landing page for every customer every single time, and no two experiences are the same. And if you need a service, it can also do that and provide that to other agents. Then you lock an agent to agent economy, by the way, which will have trillions of microtransactions, upon which the future global economy will be built. You can take that to the bank. And then the governments will take that to the bank too, because this is how they're going to fund social programs, but with a VAT on such transactions. But I digress.
There's no digression
Yeah,
here. These are all open streams of consciousness. So I appreciate your insights.
yeah.
So when you start looking ahead, you start mentioning having these microtransactions with agents interacting with other agents. Um, when you look at that frontier going forward, where do you see that realistically coming into play?
When or where?
Both.
Okay. There are over 300 million APIs out there in the world. That's like an estimate. I did some research to try to answer that question: how many APIs are in the world? Nobody really knows. Many are hidden, and the ones that are public, there's some really good science and try to estimate what they are, but they're in the hundreds of millions, and that is today. So in a way, you can already say the when question is already kind of today. Um, Hugging Face has countless, hundreds of thousands of API models already on its own. Um, so all that's missing is the orchestration layer. And agentic workflows is where the orchestration happens, right? So you can orchestrate them with a basic ChatGPT where you enter those APIs into a basic agent, or you can already use them and orchestrate them in something like SmythOS, where you can create basic agents with drag and drop, but you can also create advanced agents with visual drag and drop, where you have more control. And each of these APIs can be orchestrated already today. So the technology is here, but it is not everywhere. It's not ubiquitous. It's not being used and experienced by every human on a daily basis in the same way the smartphone is ubiquitous today, right? Um, so did we have smartphones in the 90s? Yeah. Uh, did smartphone revolution really happen until the iPhone? No. So we're kind of in that phase. Like, I remember my grandfather, like maybe it was the late 80s or something. He had Volvos his whole life, and this is in Europe. And his dream was to one day own a Mercedes. And when he finally did, it was like a convertible Mercedes, and he had a phone, like one of those phones with horns with like a coil wire on it. He had one of those phones in his car, like where your middle compartment is. He had a phone. Somebody would call him, and he could answer the phone from his car. Right. This is before everyone had like Nokias. Right. This is
Mm-hmm.
before that. Today, right? The people that adopt agents are a lot like my grandfather. They're driving around in Mercedes convertibles, automating work and doing stuff that people go like, "Wow, this is phenomenal," right? So part of your when question is a lot like, when are we going to have the iPhone moment? When is it going to be everywhere? Where it's going to redefine the way we're going to work? I think that obviously timelines and innovation now are much condensed compared to what they used to be. Like everything is moving faster. Um, I haven't I haven't really focused too much on when is everybody going to use it. Sometimes that takes you by surprise. Like I was using GPT since GPT-2, and then all the models that went before it in my work in AI. And I think ChatGPT took even the OpenAI people by surprise, right? So the when question is really hard to answer. In some way, I would say like it's here today, and I'm certainly driving my agentic Mercedes with my phone around every day in my companies, and it is glorious. It is glorious, I tell you. Um, if you are if you are not afraid to get some grease on your elbows and you love innovation and passionate, man, you are missing out. Um, on the other hand, it's not yet for everyone. So you do need to have a passion for innovation. But I tell you, I see things done that you can do in days that used to take months. I have my own multi-agent systems working for me, working together and doing what would have taken me easily $25,000 a month, operating an entire department just with multi-agents and doing that same work that just 2 years ago would have cost me $25,000 to execute. It is mind blowing. But the when question on like when are we going to hit this magic inflection moment where all of a sudden it will be ubiquitous, it's a little hard to put a date on. If I were to just guess, I would think I would expect that aha moment to happen in the next 3 years. Um, I feel like we're we just need to close that gap between the technical competency you need to operate it and the power it already has. So if we can close that gap, the company that will do that will change the world. And hopefully it's my company. Just
There we go.
hopefully it's SmythOS. Yeah.
So going to that next step, then, um, the transition from the car phone in the 80s to the smartphone in the mid 2000s, 2008, that's a pretty big gap. Obviously, our transitions now are happening much more, as you say, much more rapidly. So we're closing the gaps between when something has been discovered and when it becomes ubiquitous or readily adopted. For organizations like banks and insurance companies that have been around for hundreds of years, how would you suggest they plan for something like this?
Well, institutions that have been around the longest are also most at risk of being completely disrupted or be made irrelevant, right? Finance is one of those industries where money has not fundamentally changed so much for thousands of years until crypto, right? And so, but it's also a very complex one, subject of a lot of regulation and, let's be real, like government power. um, I As a technologist, I know a lot about crypto, but not been uh, I've not been like a real crypto investor. I've shied away from it. And I know a lot of people made a lot of money with crypto, and a lot of people lost a lot of money with crypto as well. And I'm not saying good or not good, but there's one central thing that people seem to like happily overlook, and it is the power of central banks and the government. The power to control the money supply is central, I think, to the government's ability to be government and have power, so to speak, and influence. Um, and I don't think governments are so willing to give that up. Um, I don't think they're like very eager to just lose their central bank status. I, I think that is going to be really hard to peel that power away from them. So as long as like those things are, um, so as long as those things are cute and like, hey, side gig people do some way like collecting art, right? It's like, yeah, let them do their thing. The moment it starts threatening um, the sovereign coin and the central bank, you're not just introducing new money structures, you're eroding the very fabric of power, and that's not just going to work just like that. There's going to be, I don't know if it requires a revolution for people to want a different system, but I don't see governments willingly giving up that power. And so I think when it comes to the finance and bank industries, we see that technology is rapidly making a lot of the old structures obsolete and redundant. And we could envision a world already, technically speaking, without banks and fully decentralized money. And all these services can be reimagined. Honestly, like technologically wise, we can do it today. But the very institutions you're mentioning, they're very very regulated, very intertwined with government interests. So it's very complex. Um, but on the topic of banks and finance institutions, obviously fintech is an incredible field with unbelievable potential. Um, but there's also a lot of antiquated code and antiquated systems, like the strongholds of COBOL in the world. Right? If it ain't broken, don't fix it. Right? Finance institutions. AI provides a historic opportunity to rewrite old code and make it more modern and up to date, bring it to the next century. So I see just a new generation of young kids who go to school and just refuse to learn COBOL. It's like it's not what I want. It's not useful. It's dying, right? And so they end up having the like dinosaurs, uh, not meant derogatory to elderly people. We have like dinosaurs to the code that's a kobold that will go extinct. Um, and companies know they have a ticking time bomb on their code on their hands with that code. Yeah, when's the last senior developer who knows how to maintain these systems going to retire?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
Or
so
when's the
there's
last
no
senior
choice.
one who's already retired and has come back from retirement to fix something?
Oh yeah,
Gonna get.
exactly. So it is time. It is time to update that. And if you're interested, I heard that Compass UOL has a department that does a phenomenal job with using AI to translate such things like COBOL to modern languages with the most innovative AI technology. So yeah, your question was, what about such industries that are maybe slower to adapt? I think they will find AI to be a great ally in that transformation, but also they have a high incentive to innovate because they are among the most disruptable industries around. They say that a company who does not disrupt itself will be disrupted by a competitor, and an industry that does not innovate or disrupt itself will also face the same outcome. So I think the incentives are tremendously high, Michael. I really think that when the incentives are aligned, magic can happen. And I think that makes fintech a very exciting space to work in.
I would agree that we're certainly seeing the transitions in those industries that are more well established has we've seen that technology requirement, or at least the disruption from even potentially non-competitors. Once Apple gets into banking, what happens to banking, right? It's a question that people have, because there's a lot of things, as you mentioned, that could be disrupted quite easily. Now, one of the institutions we haven't really talked about, but is key for us, especially as we look at from you mentioned this sort of existential kind of questions here, is education. We still have people, and people learn at a certain rate. but they're also
Mhm.
taught specific things as we go. Can we keep up educating the folks, the kids of the future, to allow them to understand how best to integrate this technology that hasn't even existed yet or won't exist until they graduate?
Yeah. So I love this topic of education. We've got two kids in school. One is a senior elementary, another's a freshman in high school. And I've had this thing with my oldest, at least going back to him being like 6 years old, and this concept of like daddy summer school, and where I try to supplement what the public education is like, leaving gaps in my kids' education. AI has become a very big part of uh, of of that. Even now, as he's entering in high school, um, he built two AIs for his new Minecraft community. One to moderate the community, and one to moderate his own behavior as an admin. And it's like that's a really good idea. The government might want to take from you. Keep the government in check with AI. Um, and then he also I used to like find tutors for him. Shout out if you're listening. Thank you for everything you've done. Um, but nowadays he says, Dad, I don't know how kids did school before AI, and he finds AI to be the most patient tutor on the planet. Right. So never tired of his questions, never occupied in a hurry, never having to split attention with other kids, and always helpful. And ever getting better and better too. Um, so AI as a tutor is phenomenal potential for education. I am so excited about this. I think a lot of the difference in kids' performance is like the amount of support they get in their education, whether it's from parents or tutors or other adults that take an interest in them. And there's so many kids who are just falling through the cracks of the system, so to speak. And they internalize things like, I am not smart. Like by the time you get to high school, a kid will have a self image. I am smart. I am not smart. I am mediocre. And those are lies. Those are lies. I think kids have so much potential. The other kids they compare themselves to are oftentimes, kids that just have had more out of school support, maybe more structured environment, less drama, more tutoring, more involved parents, a brother or sister who shows them how to solve the problem, a teacher who was involved in their life and really took an interest. I mean, so many reasons. Before you start concluding that I am not smart or I am mediocre, before you ever get to that point, you should exhaust every other part that you can control, right? And I would say the vast majority of kids' self esteem and how they view themselves is pretty solidified by the time they get to high school. And I object, and I don't agree. I think kids oftentimes just need to have that opportunity to have such a teacher that takes a personal interest, or a tutor that shows them it wasn't really so hard after all. I just didn't understand the way you explained it. Also, understanding that different kids have different learning styles because they have different talents, right? Why do so many kids with good grades end up not being so successful in the workplace later, but then kids who struggled in school end up being millionaires, right? If it's true that you say I'm not smart, right, then that wouldn't make sense. But the truth is that all humans, all kids are beautiful. They're beautiful in their own way, in their own mind. And sometimes divergent thinkers are the same people who end up making world changing discoveries. And they were not appreciated. And you look at like Einstein in school, it's not that special. Honestly,
Right.
like in school too, I was mediocre, but I do very not mediocre things with my life and my career. And I would love school reunions. Although I grew up in Belgium, I loved my classmates, but I was different then and I'm different today. And I'm proud of being different. there is this fear that AI will make us dumb because it will do everything for us. But that goes contrary to age old wisdom that we are the average of the people we hang out with most. And if you start spending more time with very patient, smart AIs that can help you, show, and teach you, it stands to reason that transfer learning will apply to humans too, because we are like sponges. It stands to reason that kids will be even more capable of doing things. And so I think the future of education is exceptional because we can now have a future where every child has that support, and every child deserves a private tutor that is patient, endlessly patient, and helps them work through their assignments. I lament the reality, which I do not. I love teachers. I honor teachers. I think it's one of the most noble jobs on the planet, and we do not pay them enough and take care of them enough, nearly as much as they deserve to be. I think it's an obvious truth to everyone. But by the nature of their job, they do not have the exposure or knowledge that we have in the open market working on AI. Teachers cannot be expected to know what we know in the field. And as a parent, I'm looking at that with painful realization that the teachers that are teaching my children don't know AI, fear AI, and don't know how to prepare my kids for a future where AI will change the workspace. So that does not diminish the value of their education, however, because an education is not so much about learning as learning how to learn. The struggle, the struggle is your salvation in everything.
Exactly.
If you do not struggle in the gym, you will not make progress. If you do not struggle morally, you will not
That's where
become
the
a
growth
moral person,
happens, right?
right? And so school can be hard, and it should continue to be challenging for kids within their reach, of course. And so even if the teachers don't have the future of AI in mind, they are meta learning. They're learning how to overcome challenges. They're learning how to organize themselves to meet certain deadlines.
And to be
They're,
prepared for those types of changes that are coming, right?
yeah,
It's not going to stop getting any faster here. We're only going to go faster in terms of our change. So this is the way we can prepare them, is to allow them
yeah,
to understand how to change with the change.
yeah. If I wish something would happen in like a next administration, like a next political cycle or something, I don't see it happening. I don't see the conversation happening, but I wish this would happen for education. I wish we would say as a nation that this AI technology can be pretty darn useful to help children. And just like we say that everyone should have access to roads and police and so forth, I think we should take AI and make it available to children as a way to help them in school. And we should we should have a national dialogue with the teachers on how we do not make AI taboo in schools, but rather fully embrace it and update the way that we grade children despite the use of AI. But we need to as a country we need to start fully embracing it.
Yeah.
And until then, parents can fill that gap at home, and that will create inequalities in society down the line.
Yeah.
So in 10 years from now, don't don't say, hey, there's a gender gap in income. Today is the day you can change equality outcomes for 10 years from now, because men are more eager to adopt AI today when you look at the statistics. Don't say there is a gap, an income gap based on communities because they couldn't afford better teachers or better schools. Today is the day we fix the equality situation 10 years from now. So I think today we should embrace AI in education, and we should make it available to children, and we should have a national dialogue about how we prepare children to use AI in the workspace. Because if your teacher says don't use AI, and you get into in order to pass, and then you get into workspace, you will be fired for not using AI because
Right.
you're unproductive.
Right.
So our education should be preparing us for the future, not holding us back. And
Totally
so
agree
that
with
needs
that.
to change. We need to really have that dialogue. But the opportunity in education is more exciting than ever. I think we can really enter a golden age of education and a golden age of science and a golden age for opportunity as well. If we really care about giving every human being in our country and in the world a more level opportunity to express their talent and their beauty and their potential, then it is education where we can make that difference in the long term more than any other field.
I would agree. I would agree. Well, we've spanned the gamut here on existential talks of governments, education, the future of AI, the future of work, but it was a great conversation. So, Alexander, I really want to thank you for being with us today to talk through this great conversation, and looking forward to see where agentic AI is going to take us in the future. So, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael.